All right, good morning and welcome everybody. Welcome to the summer edition of the E-QIP webinar series supporting QI. And really happy to be able to bring this webinar to you today and look at change management and also look at also organizational support. And we're going to hear from an agency that's been working with E-QIP around some pretty cool and innovative stuff. So we're excited that you're able to join us today. Now, hopefully you can see my screen okay on your computer. If you do have any trouble and you can't see it for any reason, you can type into the chat box, which is located on the bottom of the GoToWebinar control panel. If you have any issues, you can type them in there and we'll try to respond and resolve those for you immediately. So some technical information. For today, all participants, with the exception of the presenters, are going to be on mute. So hopefully you can hear us either through your phone or through the computer speakers, whichever you choose to do. We'll have time at the end of each of the two presentations today for questions. So there'll be lots of time for that. But feel free during the presentations as questions or comments arise, you can type them into the chat box and we'll make a list of those. And then at the end of each of the two presentations, we'll give some time for the presenters to respond. Alternatively, you can hold your questions and type them in during that period between presentations. All of these slides and material that we talk about and share today will be made available to you on the E-QIP community of practice. So I can see from the attendee list that many of you are already on the community of practice, which is great. But if you're not, please let us know, and you can email myself or the general E-QIP email address, which we'll provide at the end of the session, and we'll make sure that you gain access to the community of practice with all of the webinars, tips and tools and discussion forums and a bunch of great stuff that may be helpful and relevant to you. We'll also ask at the end, we'll send out a brief feedback questionnaire and just ask that you take a couple of minutes to fill that out and let us know how we did and how we can improve. So again, just some technical information on the GoToWebinar control panel on your screen. You'll see there's a little red arrow sort of up in the top left, and you can close the control panel or minimize it by clicking the arrow to the right, and you can expand it by clicking it out to the left, and it'll bring you things like the chat box. Now I'll just give a very brief synopsis of E-QIP in case there are folks joining us today who aren't familiar with the initiative and what it is that we do, and then I'll hand it over to our two speakers for the day. So as you likely know, E-QIP is an 18-month partnership project between Addictions and Mental Health Ontario, Canadian Mental Health Association, Ontario Division, and Health Quality Ontario. And really the first partnership of its kind in the province, looking at how we can support mental health and addictions care providers to cultivate a shared culture of quality improvement. And we've been doing that over, I guess, about the last 14, 15 months now. It's gone by really fast for us, but we've been doing that through a number of different offerings to the sector. These include, as I mentioned, the collaborative community of practice, which holds resources and tools and discussion forums that you're welcome to join and participate in. It also includes access to things like the Advanced Ideas program through Health Quality Ontario, access to the Institute for Healthcare Improvement's Open School, which is a self-learning QI platform that we'd be happy to give you access to, and a great place to find international information and resources and trainings around quality improvement. We also have been offering a number of learning sessions, such as leadership training, introduction to ideas training, and of course webinars like this, the one that you're watching today. We've also been fortunate to provide 30 agencies with individualized quality improvement and data coaching support. And so today we'll be hearing from one of those agencies, which is the CMHA Peel Division, or Peel Branch, sorry, around some of the work that they did with some general E-QIP, QI, and data coaching support. So I'm looking forward to hearing that. So on the docket for the day, we're very lucky to be joined by two fantastic speakers. The first is Paula Blackstein-Hirsch, who's, I would say, one of the leaders in the province around quality improvement, who is a faculty member with the University of Toronto, and we've been very lucky to have as part of the E-QIP project. We'll also be hearing from Nancy Bratkovic, who's with CMHA Peel Dufferin, and Nancy is someone that I would consider a QI leader in the field. So it'll be great to hear about some of the work that the Peel Dufferin branch has been doing around quality improvement. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to our first speaker, Paula Blackstein-Hirsch. So Paula, you should now have control of my screen.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. Is my voice quality okay? People can hear?
Yeah, you sound great,
Mike,
Paula.
you can hear me?
Yep, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, great. So today's webinar, which it's just slightly after 9 o'clock now, I think we will probably go about an hour to an hour and 10 minutes through this section. The focus of it really is on senior leadership of a quality agenda using a framework that comes to us from IHI, or the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. But we are focusing it on enabling and leading a change in culture in organizations in order to support a quality agenda. And senior leaders are key to that type of change. Mike, I'm not able to advance. Let me just try again. There. Okay. So on this first slide, this is a slide from IHI, and it relates to their leadership framework. And one of the first key things that they talk about is leaders having new mental models. And the reason for that is that the way that leaders think and frame issues and opportunities has a significant impact on the way that staff will follow. And then we talk about high impact leadership behaviors, because as we all know, what we say is not nearly as important as what we do and how we role model for staff. And then I will introduce you to their framework to show you what the key things are that they believe that leaders need to focus on in order to lead a quality agenda, and most importantly, what are a few examples of some key leadership behaviors that actually bring those components of the framework to life within an organization. Whoops, sorry. So the first thing that we are going to do is we're going to spend several minutes talking about new mental models, and there are many, many different things that I could talk about within the construct of new mental models. But because today is focused on change management or change leadership, what we're going to focus on this morning is one of the keys to changing culture. So what is our approach to change? Is it going to be what has often been in a number of organizations, traditionally a sort of top-down or compliance type of approach to engaging in staff and trying to make change, where essentially there's a minimum performance standard identified and everyone is basically intended and required to meet that minimum standard, as compared with engaging and empowering frontline staff and inspiring them to commit to a collective goal that everyone in the organization can't help but want to rally behind. And so that's really characterizes one of the key shifts in thinking about how to bring about change in an organization. I was recently doing a leadership session for a very large international organization and was with their senior management. And at the very beginning, as we went around the room and talked about what some of the challenges were in this organization, and a senior leader was talking about why staff just don't rally behind these policies and procedures. And as we got through the course of the day, I think it became very clear to him that we were talking about this shift in mental model, and that staff will generally not rally around a compliance type of a top-down environment, but if we can inspire and engage them to commit to the reason that they actually come to work every day, that it's far more effective. And so one of the things to think about within the context of this new mental model is starting with why. I don't know if any of you have read this book by Simon Sinek. It's a very good read. And what he talks about in this is that as organizations, many of us talk about and communicate out what we're doing and how we intend to do it. But rarely do we necessarily start with why, which is what really pulls on the heartstrings of most people and gets them engaged. And one of his key examples in the book that he carries all the way through is Apple Computer and Steve Jobs. And he says, Steve Jobs didn't talk about creating new technology and how we would do that. What Steve Jobs talked about was changing the world. And that's far more inspiring. Once he told people that he was going to be changing the world, people became curious about what that meant. And then he talked about the what and the how. So it is about starting with why. And that's exemplified in this next slide where, will we inspire our staff by starting with performance indicators that they're accountable for achieving certain targets on? Or will we really engage them by establishing stretch goals to improve client care? And we know, I love this quote, I've used it for many years, that none of us wants anything imposed on us. And so you can't impose anything on anyone and expect them to be committed to it. Many of us will respond if we're given an end goal that someone would like us to achieve, and we're given the freedom to be creative and to think about how best to get there. So how do we best do that? By engaging and empowering frontline staff. Our frontline staff, as many of us know, have lots and lots of ideas. What we need to do is give them the tools they need and then allow them to unleash their creativity and their passion. In other words, they need to be given permission to lead rather than to comply. And so I think there are a lot of organizations that have sort of what I term a permission type of culture, where we hear several things from staff that I'll go through with you. And I certainly, this isn't specific to mental health and addictions. I've worked across many sectors, but I certainly heard this over the course of this year from a few of the teams that we worked with in E-QIP. And it's just that it is a state of evolution and a journey, but staff who say things like, or we hear reflected, I don't think I can try this new idea without first getting permission by management. Or I don't think I can address this problem without my manager's permission. Or even though this new procedure mirrors the changes that we've already been testing, I'm not allowed to change a policy or procedure without senior management permission. Or, I love this one, I can't trial a new form without the approval of the forms committee. And whenever we start projects with organizations, we say, you've got to be allowed to try things and test them. If you have to get approvals at every stage, the project will last for 5 years. It will kill it. So most of these permissions are indeed not regulatory. Many of them are organizationally self-imposed, and they can really tend to stifle energy for change. So within, I'm not saying, let everything go, but within certain contexts, within certain boundaries, staff are engaged and inspired to be involved in a project. And it's important to, within those boundaries, to give staff the permission to try and test things without constantly having to go for approvals. If the right systems of oversight and senior leadership meetings and conversations and mentoring are going on, there isn't going to be anything wildly different going on that you're not aware of. And so we know if we don't want sheep, we need to give staff the room that they need to be creative and to come up with ideas for change. This comes from Helen Bevan, who is a change leader in the UK, and I just thought this was a really cute and something I thought I'd share with you. And I don't think, if I could hear you, hopefully you're chuckling when you see this. And yet, I'm sure that we've all seen or heard this in different organizations. So as a leader of an organization, it's our most basic role to release the human spirit in our frontline staff that creates for them initiative, creativity, and entrepreneurship. And that's really what we want of our staff. Creating a culture of continuous improvement requires constancy of purpose, and so it's a relentless focus, and you'll see this reflected in the IHI framework. It means long-term commitment to key leadership behaviors, which we're going to talk about, in order to create trusting relationships between leaders and staff. It's when we have those trusting relationships that start to evolve within the context of a learning culture that over time, a culture of continuous improvement begins to evolve. And it's not, as all of you know, it's not a switch that, unfortunately, it's not a switch that you can flip on. It's a culture that evolves slowly over time through seeing leaders model certain behaviors and creating trusting relationships with staff. And so once you start down this road, it isn't something that it's not like a project that we can just do once. If we give people a cause and an aim, a goal that's, for example, a 3 to 5 year goal, you're going to expect a relationship, not a transaction, between yourselves and them as a very critical and necessary ingredient for change. Excuse me. These shifts in thinking may be new for some organizations, the shifts in thinking that I've been talking about for the last couple of minutes or a few minutes, and perhaps not so new for other organizations. So this, having talked about shifting mental models and about how best to enable organizational change, we're going to, I'm not going to go through each component of this now, but this is the IHI High Impact Leadership Framework, and we will walk through each of these sections and talk about some of the key leadership behaviors that link to a majority of the components in this model. But before we do that, I thought we might pause for a minute and use the chat function to get some input on your thoughts on what is actually good leadership. And we can use this next slide perhaps as a guide to think about if you could just use the chat function. So just type in some either things that you think are good or attributes of a good leader, characteristics that you see reflected in good leaders, behaviors that you've seen good leaders model, personality traits, values. So if we can just type those in, I'll give you maybe a couple of minutes. And if you can use that chat box to the right where it says type message here, and I'll try to keep my eye on it and see what I see being typed. It just takes one person to start a roll.
I see there's one in the, they're coming up in the question box, Paula. So I'm not sure if you can see that or not.
No, I can't.
People have said trusting staff, fair, active listener, honesty, share knowledge, build capacity in staff.
Very good. Yes.
Build relationship, empower staff, open to new ideas, supportive, approachable, inspiring.
Okay, those are good. Yeah, leaders are absolutely embracing many of those attributes. Individuals who are humble, and if we open leadership text these days, which I'm sure many of you have done or read articles, it's no longer the leader that's sort of. In fact, somebody said to me at a conference, I heard a speaker about a year or two ago saying, leaders no longer ought to be interesting, rather leaders should be interested. And that's always stuck with me because we're really looking for leaders who create followership. And so Kevin Cruz has come up with, and there are many, many definitions that embrace a number of the attributes that you typed in. One of the ones that Kevin Cruz came up with, if I can just advance my screen, there we go, whoops, is this one. So leadership is a process of social influence. So what leaders are trying to do is influence people to follow, and leaders maximize the efforts of others towards achieving a stated goal. So it is a leadership role to set and establish goals and targets, and then to use processes of social influence to get everyone in the organization following. So we all know, and for many years, if we went to leadership courses, it was actually about how to manage. And those skill sets, I'm not going to read through them, are all on the right side, and we are all very, very familiar with them. But it's the leadership skills that are on the left side that is really what we're talking about today. Leaders articulating a clear vision that speak to the values of the people who we serve and the people who are in our organizations. And then identifying behaviors and methods for inspiring, enabling, and role modeling what we'd like to see in others. And it's not that management skills are not required. Both are required, but in a number of organizations that any of us might walk into, we might see a lot more of what's on the right side and a lot less of what's on the left. And then boards wonder why the targets on goals that they've set aren't being achieved. So let's walk through the IHI leadership model piece by piece. And what I'm going to try to do over the next half hour is just share with you just a little tidbit. There are leadership days which focus on this framework, which take a whole day. So we're just going to do a small little piece related to each of these components this morning. So the first, in terms of the component that links to creating vision and building will, what are some of the key leadership behaviors that link to ensuring that as a leader you are creating that vision and building that will among staff in the organization? And the leadership behavior that links to that is up here as a relentless focus. So it's senior leaders remaining focused on the vision and strategy, and that communication. We cannot communicate enough. You've heard the phrase communicate, communicate, communicate. And so, again, this is very quick, but some of the, just a few examples of how senior leaders can relentlessly focus on that vision and build will is by having a few key priorities for the quality agenda that serve the organization, that anchor those annual plans for 3 to 5 years. So much like a strategic plan, there are these priorities that are articulated in specific and measurable ways so that everyone understands what the priorities are, and everyone will know if and when those priorities have actually been achieved to the target level desired, and then communicating it, and communicating it. It's important to have no more than a few of these, and really then focusing on those vital few, and those aims, those priorities need to be inspiring so that people want to rally behind them. Once you've got those, everyone in the organization needs to be lined up behind them. From the board, the staff need to see that the board is committed to overseeing them and in fact has had a hand in establishing them. And then it cascades all the way down to the front line, because after all, we know that change occurs for our clients at the front line of service delivery. And then we'll talk a little bit about this later, but then it's I put discipline push. I really think a better word is pull, a discipline pull to achieve results. And I'm just going to share with you an example. I happen to be on the board of the Sinai Health System and chair their quality committee. This is an organization that's been on a quality journey for several years. But over the past 2 to 3 years, as the organization merged with a couple of other organizations and has become a much bigger health system, we created, I think it's a little ambitious, but this is 4 areas with some sub-aims under it, and you can't actually see the aims, but this is a communication infographic, if you will, that everyone in the organization is familiar with, that touches on 4 of the 6 domains of quality: safe, effective, timely, and patient and family-centered care. And if I were just to share with you 4 examples, they have higher level aims with some sub-aims under them, but I'll just reference a couple. So the one in the top left corner is make care safer by eliminating preventable harm or death caused in the delivery of care. And so the target attached to that is by eliminating, that's a 0% target. There were some skeptics in the organization, and I can identify one individual who is a well-known infectious disease physician who was somewhat skeptical about whether that was possible with C. diff, which is that CDI infection. And over the course of the last year and a half, as they've brought their rate down, she is becoming more and more of a convert, and now understands why articulating these and communicating these kinds of aims over and over in the organization is so, so helpful. The organization just went through accreditation, and one of the comments of the accreditors was that everyone they spoke to in the organization knows these aims, they know what the organization is focused on and improving, and knows how at their level in the organization they are contributing to one or more of these aims. And that's really the goal in terms of having something out there, the vital few that everyone is focused on, and having senior leaders have a relentless focus. Another comment that came to me as part of being on a board committee there was the current president and CEO, who was a senior physician a year or two ago in the organization, when we first established these aims, said, wow, I'm hearing these aims articulated over and over in the organization, and we are making decisions based on them. So we are making resource allocation decisions based on these aims that we've set for ourselves. And this is how we're making decisions in the organization. And it just makes things so much more transparent and so much more clear. So I can't emphasize enough the role of senior leaders in articulating and then putting a relentless focus and communicating these and modeling a commitment to them. So moving on to being driven by persons in community, and this really speaks to client engagement in your organizations. And this is becoming more and more emphasized as a critical feature of driving a quality agenda and making change. And I know that in the mental health and addiction sector, there are many of you who have involved your clients, your consumers at various tables for a number of years. Also through the E-QIP initiative, I've started to hear, as we've talked about methods for engaging clients in improvement work, heard folks talking about the extent to which some of those engagements in the past have been truly meaningful, and whether there are ways of really enhancing and building on that. And certainly in organizations that I've worked with and alongside, where this is becoming more and more of a focus, there are comments like, wow, it really changes the conversation at the table and really takes us to a different place when we do this well. And so the high impact leadership behaviors that are linked to this is being consistently person-centered in both word and deed. So the importance that we say it should play in the organization, and then the mechanisms that we put in place to actually enable and operationalize that meaningful engagement. Sorry. I'm just going to go into just a few examples of what could that mean. It is routinely engaging with clients and families. That's on both a formal and an informal basis. Even as much as senior leaders walking through the organization where clients are present and just chatting with them, having a conversation about what's going well, what the organization might be able to do better to better meet their needs. That kind of informal conversation. It is about establishing different advisory councils or engaging our customers on various organizational committees. And then through our improvement work, which we focused a lot on in E-QIP this year, is ensuring that when we form a team around a project, that there are actually clients on that team who can help us to share their perspectives on where the issues and challenges are, and also help to come up with ideas for change. They will come up with all kinds of things that staff might not necessarily think about because we have a different perspective. And so this is just a representation of that is a framework that talks about levels of engagement from consultation through to true partnership, and then different levels within an organization. So one area that we can think about is direct service delivery, where the intent and the goal is to have clients have meaningful involvement in directing their service. Secondly, all sorts of ways from an organizational perspective of thinking about engaging clients, whether it's on some organizations do this for any committee where clients will be touched, any decision-making committee where the decisions will have an impact on clients. They make sure that they have clients on those committees. And then an approach that we taught a number of teams in E-QIP this year who were doing projects is experience-based co-design, which is a methodology for meaningfully involving our clients in improvement work. So the next component of the model that we're going to talk about briefly is developing capability. And this is capability for quality improvement at all levels within an organization. Staff need to have this QI knowledge and skill to be able to make effective and sustainable improvements. We're talking about making change, and it's challenging to set goals and make people accountable without providing them with the tools that they require to effectively make those changes. And it can't all be delegated. So leaders also need to have some familiarity with QI methodology. Don't need it at the detailed level, although that'd be helpful, but it's not necessary. But at least to conceptually understand the tools and skills that staff need so that there's some good understanding of what it takes to make change and what needs to be resourced in the organization in order for staff to make change. In addition to providing and enabling the front line, it's also about that informal, authentic presence at the front line and being a visible champion of improvement. And I will show you a slide in about, I think it's about 4 or 5 slides from here, just of an example of, depending on how you set up quality improvement in your organization, if it's set up with a whole cascading formal system and you've got metrics on walls or in transparent places, it becomes much easier for senior leaders to engage at a staff level on a formal or informal basis in really demonstrating an interest in what the staff are doing, asking questions, and doing some informal coaching. And so in terms of that frontline engagement, that capability for improvement, it's important for the first 2 bullets are about an organization deciding what methodologies they're going to adopt for improvement. You will likely have heard of a number of organizations who may decide that lean methodology is the way that they are going to approach all improvement. And lean is not just a set of tools, it's a whole management philosophy. There are other organizations that decide they're going to take an eclectic approach. So it depends on the problem they're addressing. If they're addressing a client flow issue or an access or a timeliness issue, they may adopt lean. For other kinds of problems, they may adopt and stick with the model for improvement. And not necessarily an approach like lean. Whatever the case might be, articulating how you're going to approach quality improvement in the organization and then being consistent is what the literature says is important. Lean, Six Sigma model for improvement, there is no evidence that one is better than the other. It's just about being consistent in your approach. And engaging and training frontline staff, so equipping them with the tools And then there is a role for senior staff. So we started the E-QIP project with an executive sponsor day to inform and share with exec sponsors what their role is in supporting and mentoring teams within the context of a project. So there are general behaviors we're talking about today that senior leaders can play regardless of a range of projects going on in an organization, and then a specific role for a senior leader within a project to be attached to that project and be that regular authentic presence and that visible champion, removing barriers, supporting the team, answering questions, etc. And then also ensuring that the front line has strong project management, which is critical for successful improvement. So just a few slides to exemplify that. The reason we go through all of this quality improvement training, those not familiar with QI methodology may say, well, why bother? We know how to make change. And the traditional way of making change in many organizations, it's the way we were all trained way back, was for a group of managers to have an idea for change, to go into a conference room and plan to hopeful perfection. And then once the plan is pretty much complete, it's approved, and then one day the switch gets flipped and is messaging out that from here on in, this is the new policy and procedure, and this is the new way of doing things. And we know that over the years, not all initiatives have been overly successful, and we've often run into problems with implementation and then wonder why. Quality improvement was actually brought in to address some of those issues. And so the quality improvement approach is to combine subject matter knowledge with this QI knowledge. And what we do is, first of all, it is solely a group of managers. It's a group of managers with lots of representation from frontline staff, because we know that frontline staff actually have a lot of ideas and also know what's actually going on in the organization, know what the processes are that actually play out at the front line. So what we do is we form a team of management and frontline. We do design, but we don't spend months and months planning. We get an idea of design, we understand what's at the root cause of the problem, and we come up with change ideas. And then we go into the real world and we test them, and we learn from those tests and then modify them. And it's this small rapid cycle change. Get approvals at the end of that testing if necessary, and that's when we actually formulate our policies and procedures. After we've tested, we've tweaked, and we have something that we believe is going to achieve our goals. And all through this testing and measuring, we are measuring so that we know whether the changes we're making are resulting in improvement. Critical. And only then do we implement fully with all staff and try to ensure that all staff are adhering to the new way of doing things. And incidentally, because frontline staff have been engaged, because they've come up with the ideas for change. Remember that slide of you can't impose anything on anyone and get them to commit to doing it. The staff will be much more likely to commit to these changes because they've come up with them. They've tested them, they've modified them, and given that hard work and the fact that it's their ideas, they will be more inspired to sustain those results. The reason for this sort of squiggly lines on the left is that we often show these small rapid cycle changes on a straight ramp, but we know in the real world, it's rarely a straight ramp. It is a complex, we do work in complex environments, and things do get bumpy.
Paula, I just wanted to respond to a question that came up very quickly, and that is around the slides being available. Evelyn was asking if she could have access to make notes on them. So Evelyn, I just want to let everybody know that I just shared them in the handout section on the control panel. So you should be able to have access to the handout slide there, and then you can write on them as you wish. And Ivan, sorry, has also suggested, Paula, as I realize you're fighting a bit of a bug, if you'd like to take a break for a drink at any point, folks are okay with that too.
Okay, well, I apologize for the quality of my voice. I don't usually sound like this, but yeah, this is about day 10. I'm much better than I was, but thank you. So I just wanted to share with you the foundation of quality improvement. For those of you who aren't familiar, I appreciate that there are probably a number of you on the phone who are very familiar with this. The science for improvement is the foundation for the quality improvement tools that we use, and this is one of the first things that we go through, and these are the stages that we follow in moving a project from beginning to end. So we start with a problem statement and ideally some data, some baseline data that demonstrates, in fact, that it provides evidence that there is a problem. So sometimes people will have a hunch that there's something that's a challenge in the organization. It's far more validating and far easier to get people behind you in terms of making change if you have evidence through some data for some outcome measure that can reinforce to people and validate to them that indeed there is a problem. Once that problem is articulated, we then move to really it's the opposite side of the same coin. We take that problem and we flip it, and we create a specific and measurable aim statement that speaks to when we'll achieve it, what the target for that is, and a good aim statement will actually have an outcome measure in it, and an outcome measure will align with one of the 6 domains of quality, and it will be something that matters to your clients. Can't be about process. In order to inspire and engage people, it's that compelling why. It must be something that is going to improve the service delivery for your clients and that everyone can see that so that they rally around it. Once we have that aim statement, we move back to the problem and say, we can't come up with changes until we can identify what's truly at the root cause of this problem, or what are the root causes underlying the problem. Once we have very detailed root causes, we can come up with a change idea, at least one change idea that addresses each of the root causes. And then once we have those change ideas, we move into doing small rapid cycle change, testing and measuring and tweaking. We are measuring using data over time. And then once we get the results we are hoping for, there are methods that we use to sustain. So that's the science of improvement that we go through. And in terms of which method is better, I'm using the term fundamentals of improvement for the model for improvement at the top there. You can see Six Sigma, Lean. These are terms that I'm sure many, if not all of you, have heard. And the purpose of this slide is just to share with you that if you look across, and I'm not going to read through this, but if you look across each of these 3 arrows, if you will, in red and gray, they all have essentially the same steps in them. So regardless of which approach we use, they are all founded on the science of improvement. They all include defining the problem in the aim, project setup. They all go through root causes through diagnostic tools and analysis of the results before we get to change ideas. And then small rapid cycle change and measurement is at the tail end of all 3 of these approaches. there are just some nuances in terms of the tools, in terms of the labor intensity, in terms of the sophistication of knowledge of staff. The fundamentals of improvement is core to any project, and we often refer to it as a model for improvement. Lean has become very common in health care delivery. Six Sigma is generally more focused in the manufacturing and other industries. It takes a lot more sophistication, a lot more data analysis, a lot more time, and generally is shaving seconds or minutes off of processes, and we have so much room to remove steps in our healthcare delivery that most people will say we have a lot of work to do with the fundamentals of improvement or the model for improvement and lean before we ever need the tools and sophistication of Six Sigma. And then finally, before we move on to the next component of the model, being an authentic presence at the front line. So this is just a picture of a senior leader being at a board on a wall where there's measurement. And what we put on our walls speaks a bit to what's important in the organization. And so putting up information around places where work is being done not only focuses frontline staff on it, but as a senior leader, you can then wander through informally or come, on a designated scheduled visit to a unit and stand with staff in front of a board like that and actually engage in conversation with them. And you don't have to have a lot of knowledge about the project. You just need to know the right questions to ask. And by doing so, and there are only a few questions, by doing so, and if you're interested, there is, and I think it's also on the E-QIP platform, from IHI, there is a 2-page primer, if you will, on how to do an executive review of a project. But it's really just going up and asking staff to share with you, what is this project about? And if they have measures saying, oh, it looks like, you're improving on this, it looks like this hasn't quite moved yet. Can you tell me a little bit about what's behind this and what you're seeing in this measurement and why? It's that kind of conversation that demonstrates, A, you're interested, B, you're committed to quality improvement, and in the moment, as you get more and more experience, you can potentially play a role in coaching and mentoring. So it is about that authentic presence. And then moving finally to delivering on results. So having put all of these other pieces into place, need a system, we talked a little bit about it, of cascading from the board down to the front line. So a method of saying, if these are our priorities, how is this all getting operationalized? Who's responsible for which initiatives that fall under each of these aims? What are the targets for them? What are the timelines? What measurement are staff getting on a regular basis that will allow them to monitor their own progress on contributing to and achieving those goals and priorities? And so a key ingredient to changing culture is transparency. Transparency be about results, transparency about progress, and we need, in a learning culture, to be transparent about the good and about the not so good. And so if at board meetings, if at senior team meetings, if at meetings with staff, we only applaud the good and we don't actually address the challenges, then staff immediately see through that, and that eats away at that trusting relationship. So addressing both and problem solving together, it's not anyone's fault. 99% of the time, challenges that we have in process are really about the systems that we've placed people in, the systems that are present. It's not anyone's fault. So how do we together engage in conversation about problem solving around those challenges? And so some of the behaviors, the high impact behaviors, are first and foremost, as a senior leader, you can't go and have a conversation with staff about measurement if that measurement A isn't being done on an ongoing basis, not just at the beginning and at the end, but we need for improvement data at frequent data points over time so that everyone can engage in conversation about how we're doing. So A, the measurement has to be done. B, it has to be done in real time and up to date. And C, it has to be transparent. And then cascading strategically through the organization. So we don't want to inundate everybody with everything. We want to make sure that people who are contributing to certain initiatives have an eye on the measurement that's relevant to them. And that regular reviews are being done, not just as their own team, but with that executive sponsor. And certainly some organizations who have really transformed their organizations through improvement have different levels of regular reviews. So teams may have them weekly, monthly with the exec sponsor, but then sections of an organization may be doing like a quarterly review with all projects, with the management team and all staff involved in projects. So whatever you can manage, whatever you can do in that way is all part of a system for moving a quality agenda forward. And accountability is important. So people, it's a gift. Sometimes people don't necessarily know exactly what they're accountable for. Being clear about that and ensuring that people actually understand what they're individually and as a team accountable for is extraordinarily helpful. And this is just to say that often we think about measurement through scorecards and dashboards, which are helpful at senior levels. I would say they're helpful, but in the absence of data, looking at data over time on run charts, excuse me, or statistical process control charts, you can't really tell what's going on, and you may in fact ask questions that aren't pertinent or make decisions that aren't relevant without looking at those data over time. Staff at the front line definitely need more detailed run charts, control charts, all the things that are relevant to the projects that they're involved in. This is just in the spirit of thinking about transparent measurement. And this is kind of at one end of the continuum, but rather than a scorecard, I had the privilege, it must be about 7 or 8 years ago now, of visiting WellStar Health System in Atlanta, Georgia, where they had a high-level aim of decreasing serious safety events. That's what SSE stands for. Over a 2 to 3 year period, they had a lot of safety events in the organization. It was a large acute care health system. What's on this was initials, obviously, of patients, and the red were deaths that had resulted, and the blue was serious harm that had resulted from safety events. And their goal, obviously, was to eliminate harm over a 2 to 3 year period. They put a lot of work into place in terms of training staff, including all of their physicians, had a whole series of safety first training and techniques that they were focused on. There was measurement. As you walked into every unit, there was a board up of how many days since the last serious safety event, and they defined these, by the way. There were about 2 or 3 specific outcomes that they were focused on reducing. In the course of a year and a half, and as staff looked at this, many could relate to a number of the people who were reflected on this. So it was very personal, very compelling. This is where they got to in a year and a half. This is a massive change, and so that change in density is like a really huge and profound visual, a way of making data extraordinarily transparent. 77% reduction. So, nearing the very end, and we'll close by saying that as leaders, we all can, and many do, shape organizational culture one leadership behavior at a time. So we can talk about what we'd like to see in the organization, but until we make some of these mental shifts in thinking about moving from a compliance to a commitment kind of culture, and we set the stage as leaders through our role modeling of some key behaviors, culture won't change. But if we do many of these things, it can be extraordinarily rewarding, and you will see over time it's a journey. It is definitely a journey. It's not a week, it's not a month, it's not a year. But organizational cultures do shift, and staff become encouraged and enthused and excited about making change. And it isn't only top-down aims as well. Staff will, once they've been ingrained in the culture of improvement and have embedded the skills over time, they'll come up with problems at their own front line that they can just go ahead, given the tools they've been equipped with, and make those changes to make service delivery better for clients and to remove hassles from their own workday as well. So I'll just end with this visual of the IHI High Impact Leadership framework. And Mike, I don't know whether you wanted to pause between presentations to take a few questions. This has been just shy of an hour.
Yeah, let's take some time now for some questions. So folks, if you haven't already done so and you have a question or a comment to make, please enter it into the chat box, which is on the control panel, or you can ask a question via the question box, and we'll pose those to Paula now. So Paula, just a couple things came in while you were speaking. The first I thought was just a very good comment that I wanted to share from Jacqueline Smith, saying that good leadership lead from behind. I thought that was a good.
Yes, I would say that's another great way of characterizing that definition we talked about.
We did have a question wondering if you could offer any tips or suggestions on balancing inspiring stretch goals versus possibly increasing risk of failure to meet a goal. I guess if that goal were possibly too lofty. I wonder if you had wanted to comment at all on that. Sure.
It is an art, not a science, and you get experience with it over time. But, and obviously, having asked the question, you believe in stretch goals. The 3 to 5 year aims are a good place for those really stretch goals. And I'll share with you a story that someone from a health system shared with me a few years ago, where they had a high-level aim to decrease, they used the same terminology as Atlanta, serious safety events, and they had it defined using 2 or 3 indicators. And their aim was to reduce by 50% the number of events in that organization. And what that president and CEO said to me 3 years later was, we didn't achieve a 50% reduction. I knew we wouldn't, but we achieved a 25% reduction. And if we hadn't set that stretch goal, we would not have achieved that 25% reduction. And within the context of a learning culture, and perhaps you need to be a little more cautious in earlier days, but within the context of a true learning culture, people are okay with stretch goals and they become comfortable with not necessarily getting to zero. And you can also, I mean, just because you set a goal for 3 to 5 years, it doesn't mean that you can't extend it. The annual goals that you set will inch towards that. So if you set a 50%, or let's just even say a 30% reduction, then year over year you can be going for a 10% reduction, which is more manageable and achievable and in the immediate sight of staff. So those really, really stretch goals for your high-level aims that take you and anchor you for 3 to 5 years, those lesser targets that will inch you there year over year. And you do learn over time. But I can tell you that if you set a target, which I've seen many, many times, of 2 or 3% improvement, or maybe even 5 over a couple of years, staff are smart. They can figure out that actually they've achieved, especially if they have data, they've achieved that randomly without doing anything. So why bother doing anything? Stretch goals do line people up and inspire them. So hopefully that helps.
Great, thank you, Paula. Another question perhaps you might be able to answer is expanding on the importance of outcome measures versus process measures, the difference between them, and how they relate to setting goals.
So a process measure is something that allows you to determine whether a change idea has been put into place. So I'm just trying to think of something that's relevant within the sector. I'm blanking on some of the projects. Okay, I'm going to use one that relates to recovery plans for clients. So when some of the teams came in, and many people think in process terms, so one of the things that a couple of teams came in with was wanting to improve the completion of the OCAN. And so I would say to them in a provocative way, do you think your clients really care about the OCAN? And do you think that that's really going to get staff inspired and lined up behind you? But it is a process measure, potentially, that contributes to clients achieving the goals in their recovery plan. And so one change idea might be completion of the OCAN. Another change idea might be ensuring that clients are involved in establishing their recovery goals. And then the outcome measure could be the percentage of clients who achieve the recovery goals that they've set. It could be within a certain time frame, or it could be, if they set 5 or 6 recovery goals, that they achieve 80 or 85% of them. But it's something that matters to clients. And that, I would put that achieving recovery goals, they should all fit in within the 6 quality domains of safe, effective, timely, equitable, efficient, or person-centered. And so that one, I would say, achieving recovery goals is an outcome measure that would fall within the effectiveness domain. A process measure, on the other hand, which the staff need to know whether or not they're being effective in their project, is measuring the percentage of OCANs that are completed. So that's a process measure. Or the percentage of client recovery plans where the clients have been directly involved in establishing their own goals. And
Thank you, Paula.
the logic behind that is you need 90 to 100% on your process measures, meaning everyone has to have those things because the team has hypothesized that completing OCANs and having clients establish their own recovery goals will lead to the outcome measure of a high percentage of your clients achieving their recovery goals. So hopefully that example has helped.
I think that's an excellent example, Paula, and hopefully one that folks can relate to. And I would agree, just from my own perspective, completely with what you said. And I think sometimes we get very focused on the implementation of getting a new tool or something completed versus, as you said, that outcome measure. What is the value? What does it mean to clients once we have that process in place and we are completing them? And I think a very important distinction. So thank you for making it.
And I think that as a test for yourself, if you think that you've got an outcome measure and it's hopefully embedded in your aim, ask yourself two questions. One is, will our clients care about that? And will it matter to them? And number two, do you think that that's going to inspire and enthuse your staff to rally behind you? Are they going to come to work every day excited to work on that?
Great. Excellent. Thank you, Paula. Now I see, Deanna, you have your hand raised in the go-to thing. So perhaps you're having trouble with typing your question in the chat box. So there is, if you do have a question, you can type it in the chat or the question box, and we'll make sure that Paula answers that. Hopefully you're able to do that okay. So it looks like that's all the questions. I did want to make a point too in something that you mentioned, Paula, around experience-based co-design. And that's a very helpful method and something we've been using quite a bit in E-QIP to capture, understand the experience from a client perspective, and of course use that for the basis for improvement. And if folks are interested particularly in that, on the Community of Practice we have a number of resources on experience-based co-design that Paula referenced as well this morning. So that's available to you there. So thank you very much, Paula. Unless there's any other final questions or comments, or perhaps folks will have some at the end of the webinar, we can certainly circle back.
Okay, great.
Thank you. And there's Paula's contact information as well, which will be on the deck. So at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Nancy at CMHA Peel Dufferin, just to switch gears a little bit and look at some work that branch has been doing in terms of developing a framework for quality. So some really new innovative work going on there. And again, we'll allow some opportunity for questions and discussion at the end of Nancy's presentation. So Nancy, you should, in about 2 seconds, have control of the mouse.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Excellent. So thank you for the opportunity that I can bring some of our experience over the last year to a group of participants. Before I start, I wanted to actually extend a thank you to you and Coach Kim and Abel, who were very thoughtful and practical through this process for us. You were definitely good sounding boards. So I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes or so just highlighting the experience through the E-QIP project. We took a very different approach. Let me just get to the next screen. There we go. So we took a very different approach in what we wanted to do. We've got very different practices that are happening across the organization. And we wanted to look at how do we create a framework, an organizational quality framework that can help us to make some decisions decisions about what becomes a quality improvement plan, what do we filter through a continuous model, which is what we were in the process of developing, looking at what desired client outcomes are, how do we involve our stakeholders, all our stakeholders in the process. We have, over the years, been doing many projects. So we took a hard look a couple of years ago and saying, okay, how meaningful, how effective, how successful have we been in our projects? And so a couple of years ago, the organization embarked on project management training across all its leadership and embedding those project practices in the work that we do. We were able to bring our projects down from 40 to 50 down to about 20 to 30 projects in a year. And why that's important is because, you know, you can do 40 or 50 projects, but are you actually effective in the work that you're doing? Are the outcomes successful? And so we had to take a really hard look at that. And so a couple years ago, we had all our leadership trained in project, as well as it's starting to extend across the organization through administrative support as well, and building some capacity. We also looked at our data, and part of this project was looking at, you know, how do we really start to streamline some very clear indicators. We wanted to look at staff program and organizational targets, client satisfaction, what are the best practices, and setting some standards to help us move along as we build our continuous improvement model in the organization, but also to help us make decisions about what are we going to work on, what methodology are we going to use, and what tools are we going to use in doing this. And to Paula's point around, you know, building the capability and encouraging and engaging some change ideas across the organization was what was driving this for us. So why? I talked about the structure for continuous improvement. We've just recently implemented that, and I'll go into that in a bit more detail about what that looks like. Who's involved in making these ideas, presenting these ideas, and supporting the work of the projects moving forward? We wanted to look at what stakeholders need to be involved and at what level of involvement, and that includes our board. So it's looking at the governance structure. So is the board, which our board is not an operational board, it's a policy governance. So how are they involved? And they also have a lens on quality, both at an organizational level as well as a systems level. We wanted to be very clear about what our vision, our quality vision as an organization is. And we figured a framework is going to help us to define that, not just for internal benefit purposes, but also for purposes that are helpful outside of the organization through a public lens. The other piece was increasing awareness of quality across the organization. So again, to Paula's point around change ideas, how do we foster those, and how do we increase people's skill sets and developing capabilities? So some of the considerations that we made was quality is across the whole organization. And it may look different depending on what projects or what initiatives we want to work through. So what does that look like in a back office or corporate service environment versus a direct service environment? Again, I talked about using different methodologies and looking at lean. So one of the other things in addition to project is we did a lean training across our leadership, and we're able to transfer some of that knowledge and skills base to frontline staff that are involved in some of the projects that we're doing across the organization. We also looked at the tools, and we had the fortune to have the training through the E-QIP to build some capacity around the tools that exist and how do we use those, how do we incorporate them into our work and our practice. We also were able to get to a point where we realized that our quality and our continuous improvement efforts are more than just quality improvement plans. So this is this may look different from organization to organization, and there are many out there who use quality improvement plans, which are a very effective tool to define the scope of their work as well as their projects. CMHA Peel has determined that project plans and dashboards and scorecards would be a way to go as well, and E-QIP would be part of some of the tools that we would use moving forward. A continuous improvement model is developed, and we've just recently implemented that model, and I'll explain a little bit more about some of the projects that have come out of that. But the continuous improvement model was our effort to spread the work of culture and to increase the culture of quality across the organization. So it's to encourage our staff to be able to come up with change ideas, to be able to put those change ideas forward and actually take some leadership in driving the work of implementing those change ideas, in whether it be in their program or a certain area of their work, or an impact that is larger and potentially organizational. We wanted to take an integrated approach, and I think this speaks very much to that we saw quality improvement plans a part of, or a tool that we will use. And but in addition to that, we wanted to make sure that we were able to continue to use other tools and processes such as lean methodology, and some of the tools like prioritization grids. PDSAs are another one. And that will help us to define quality very broadly across the organization. So just a bit about us, our values and our considerations through the E-QIP project really looked at our values, our leadership, integrity, inclusiveness, and accessibility, and obviously the quality. Our strategic plan really focuses around how do we ensure that we continuously work on access to service, and that we're growing in the types of services and supports we're providing to our clients. But in addition to that, we need to make sure that those that are doing their jobs have the skills and the capacity to do their jobs and to grow in their jobs as well. So some of the things that we're doing right now, and they're relatively newer to us, is performance reports and scorecards is something we've created. We've recently implemented report cards, for lack of a better word, I guess, the performance indicators that are provided in 3 reports. One that goes to staff. Staff receive those reports on a monthly basis, and they're able to see where their targets are at. And they're able to have some very robust discussions around that in their clinical supervisions. We also have them at program level, so as a management team, we're able to look at that. And we're also able to have that at a high level organizational lens as well, to see how are we doing as an agency. And that information is most useful in terms of determining our communications and strategies with our funders as well. I talked about the E-QIP. We've been actively participating in quality improvement planning for several years. We average about 2 to 3 quality improvement plans a year at this point in time. And continuous improvement is something we rolled out. We officially launched that in April of this year. And it's been a very exciting process. The continuous improvement model includes an application process where staff who have a change idea can complete an application, for lack of a better word, that can talk about what some of the change ideas, or what the change idea is. What are some of the struggles or challenges, and how do they see that this change will make that improvement, and what recommendations they have for the organization to consider doing. And we've had great success. Since April, we've had over 20 app change ideas come forward from staff, and I'll talk a little bit about what happens when we do receive those change ideas. And client feedback. And that comes in a number of different ways. We've got an internal feedback form that is done on an annual basis, and we do continuous feedback through discharge planning. But we're also rolling out the OPOC, so that will allow us to gain a very broader lens of what clients are telling us around their levels of satisfaction. And this year in particular, we're focusing on access to our services. So just to give you a quick peek at some of the things that we've developed and are continuing to develop. So these are by no way final and complete, but that's part of the evolution and testing. So we started to look at the scorecards and specific around some of the targets, and we were looking at them from four different lenses. So client, the internal processes, so what are we doing that are getting us there, our financials, and certainly our innovation and learning perspectives. So the training that we need to do and how are we driving innovation forward as an organization. And of course, the three pillars of recovery, which I'm sure this is familiar to all or most of you, and incorporating this as we're developing our lens of review and how do we make decisions around what methods are we using and how do we filter this through the quality lens as well. And of course, our 6 quality domains, and using these as another set of filters to be able to identify the change ideas and how we will move those through what streams and business processes will we move those change ideas through based on these indicators as well. So our beginnings, that gives you a bit of context. So in the beginning, we started looking at, okay, let's look at the picture. So we looked at the quality framework, and we started to define stakeholders. We started to look at what are the measures and assessments that we have that help to move us forward in improvements, our inputs, our current initiatives, and what are the desirable outcomes. And then we started to take some of that first think tank ideas and moving it through a process where we wanted to filter it through. Well, how will it flow? Who will it flow through? Who makes these ideas? And how do we then determine how do these ideas come to life? So our progress to date is, and it's really exciting to us, we ended up with a process flow, and it was very helpful to work through with our E-QIP coaches to get to a point where we're able to look at, well, how do we make some quality decisions? And let's start to develop a process flow map, which you can see here to the right of the screen, which talks about how these ideas come through to us, through what stakeholder, and then through what process around ideas and decision-making, structure, and all the way through to communications, which is the last column. How do we disseminate and communicate this more broadly across the organization? And I think that's really important when you talk about sustainability in its success as well. So we're still at the somewhat beginning stages of the picture framework. So this is sort of the one-pager that talks about, you know, what is quality for CMHA Peel? What does it look like? And we want to make sure that we're including the client outcomes of the statement. And so we've been involving our Consumer Council in helping us to determine what is important to have in that statement. So everything we do around quality needs to drive us to that very end about what's important for client outcome. So in terms of moving forward, I mentioned that we had rolled out our continuous improvement model, and we've had a huge response from many of our staff across, I think, pretty much all our programs and functional centers. And it's very exciting because it's gone through what we've now established as a review committee. And the review committee represents all levels of stakeholders. So we have management, we have project represented, as well as frontline staff at this point. Now, again, this is fairly new, so as we develop, we'll be able to build in additional stakeholder involvement, including client feedback. So how do we involve our consumer counsel further in that process? And I think that will become more evident as we start dabbling more into the co-design model as well. But our continuous improvement has allowed us to identify some of the methods that we're going to use to drive these change ideas forward. And some of those, as I mentioned, quality improvement, we currently have 3. We're working on about 4 or 5 PDSAs. For example, one of our PDSAs was looking at our intake process. And we have currently 3 points of access to the organization. And we wanted to ensure that the intake experience was consistent for our clients. It was effective and it was efficient, not only for the clients, but also for the staff. We initiated with a lean exercise, and we realized at the end of that there were over 20 points of communication with a client at the very early stages, and much of those were in way of written. So there was a lot of letters being done. And so by the time we had gone through this process and we tested out through the PDSA, we ended up with three letters at 3 different points. And so this was now implemented across the organization at any point of access for those clients that are looking for services. Project planning is something we do. So any initiative in the organization will have a project charter, a project plan, and they're accountable to produce dashboards, which are brought to the management team for review every 6 weeks on that cycle. Lean, I mentioned we've incorporated Lean methodology, and those of us who have been trained are sharing that learning, that knowledge base in the projects that we do. And most of our projects, if not all of them, are cross-represented. So our quality improvement work, there are 3 projects currently, and we've got 4 or 5 representatives that sit on each of those projects, one of which is a manager lead, and the rest are cross-frontline representatives. Business case development is relatively new for us too. We realized that some of the change ideas that people have requires funding, and in order to be able to respond through an HCIP, we realized that we have to also build business cases. And so we've developed a business case training, and it consists of just over 8 modules. We've just completed the first cohort of trainers in the organization. There were 8 who participated, and those 8 range from frontline staff to program admins to managers. And there will be 5 business cases developed as a result of that, and 5 submissions to Arlen for funding these change ideas and new business processes that are being developed. And as I mentioned, stakeholder involvement, we're very actively involved with staff engagement, but also we're looking at how do we further involve our clients. Our consumer counsel has been very active and has provided some fantastic feedback, and we're just in the beginnings of discussing with them about the co-design model. So they're very excited about that, and I'm certainly very excited about taking some information about that to them and walking through an exercise of some learning and figuring out how, as a consumer counsel, do they want to be involved in the development of our process now around co-design. So that will be some of the work coming up in the very near future for us. One of the things we wanted to make sure, and this is very much drafted at this point, but to give you a sense of, well, how do we then take some of the work and reporting that we have and roll it up in a way where we can bring it to that review committee. And the review committee will help us to determine what stream is this work going to flow into. Will it become, and for me, most importantly, what will become a quality improvement plan for the next fiscal? And so we can look at a number of ways that we bring reports in. We have administrative audits that are done. We've got client surveys. We're doing OPOC. We've got some great data on OCANs. We have an interim report that the CEO develops, and there's many more, but this just gives you a snapshot of some of the things. And we're looking at building this report and testing it in September, October with the review committee that's been established through the continuous improvement model. And the hope there is that we can use this report to be able to highlight, some of the top 2 or 3 areas that are indicated as either potential for improvement, but also to celebrate some of the successes and gains that we've made throughout the year. This will then in turn provide the review committee more information in hopes that they will then make the best recommendations of where some of this work can be streamed to and what might be some of the projects for the year coming. So looking at some of our successes and going through this, we've around culture, rolling out the continuous improvement model, we've also been able to, and we'll get into some of the skills training, is to put some cross-organizational training in place for folks. But we want to make sure that the culture involves all our stakeholders. And we put a lot of effort in the last year to increase that engagement from frontline staff. And so over the next couple months, I'll be able to do a roll-up of that and identify, well, how many of our staff are truly involved actively in a change idea process. Leadership is coming from all levels. We've engaged staff. We're engaging clients in different ways as well. Consumer Council certainly has been one of the drivers, and the board, and at what point is the board being involved. Workforce development, enhanced access, and continuum of care is our strategy. All our projects tie into that, and we validate them based on what stream of strategy does this fit into. Our structure is continuous improvement. It's the language we use. Quality is part of that. A quality assessment report are some of the resources that we're currently developing and will be testing, and a quality communication plan. We've got a couple of variations of a communication plan that we've developed to disseminate information to clients and to staff around outcomes of client feedback. And so we wanted to take a different lens and create that more as a quality vision, and so that people are understanding what we define as quality, and it becomes embedded into what they think, what they see, what they do from all perspectives, as well as the skills training. So we've done a lot of training to date, and we will continue to do a fair bit. Our target is to have 50 staff trained in PDSAs. So we bought some licensing around that, and we will be targeting for completion by March, by end of fiscal. To do that, we continue to offer some lean training, certainly rolling out the continuous improvement and quality improvement methodologies, such as training around prioritization matrices. We use the fishbone diagrams, looking at root cause analysis. Driver diagrams are some other examples, and as I mentioned earlier, business case development as well. So these are some trainings that we are providing, and we will continue to provide moving forward. So what have we learned through this development? We learned that quality improvement is part of our current business, and we do that in many different ways. Quality is everything and anything we do in the organization, but how we do it will be determined through the best means, through the best process and the best tools used that are most fitted or suited for that particular initiative. We want to continue building on that quality culture. We do that in a number of different ways so far, but we're continuously looking at how do we enhance that. We do road shows. We call them program road shows, where we'll go to teams' business meetings on a monthly basis, and we will talk about quality. So quality has been added as a regular agenda to people's business conversations within each of our programs, as is privacy and some of the other very key pieces of work that we need to keep front and center. And then formalizing all the quality work that we do. It is challenging, but we need to continue to develop ways of validating that and providing opportunity for all these great ideas that staff have to be able to come to life. So what's contributed to some of the shift for us? The continuous improvement model for certain has done that. As I mentioned, over 20 applications have been forwarded. Some of those are already in the works. They're all the way from ideas around technology improvements to enhancing efficiencies around expense summaries for staff, so that they're spending less time in the office doing their mileage and spending more time meeting clients and supporting clients in the community. Using our OPOC report so that we can hear the client voice. That's part of one of our E-QIP projects this year. And we want to not only have a better understanding of people's or client satisfaction around access to services, but part of this is also to have a better understanding of what are some of the reporting tools available, how do we use those in a very meaningful way so that we can use that information and continuously use that to improve the work that we're doing. Enhance quality reporting, and as I mentioned, quality communication. So what does communication look like, both whether it be paper or electronic? What is the information that's on that communication? Currently, we've been reporting some of the recommendations clients may have around improvement. For instance, clients were saying that they wanted to see more groups, and that was evident in some of their feedback. So we were able to report back to them in a very visual way that this is some of the feedback you provided us, and as a result of that, we've increased our group offerings, or the menu of our groups, by 20% in the last 9 months. Also, transitional supports, intake, one of the feedback from clients was that they were waiting too long for services. So we incorporated a stepped care approach to support and services last year in our quality improvement plan. And as a result of some effective transitional planning for clients at discharge, we were able to reduce our wait time for case management from 2 years to 9 months. So there's some clear successes in being able to take feedback and creating a process for that change to happen. And there's definitely some benefits that arise as a result of that. So to continue further in our journey, we're going to continue to building our data reporting tools. We need to enhance our communications and how we communicate across the organization and to our external stakeholders, our clients. We need to test it. So this fall will be very exciting for us. We'll be able to test some of our reporting tools and be able to roll out some communication plans as well. We're hoping to finally have that picture of our framework done. Now that our process is in place and we can test it finally, that we can then validate our one-page picture that clearly defines quality for CMHA appeal, and then have an organizational launch of that. And we do that in way of town halls, but we'll also use different approaches that are more intimate to ensure that we are having more personal discussions within teams and within our client base, so that they understand the work that we're doing and how they can become more involved in that. And that brings me to the end. So Mike, maybe I'll turn it over to see if there's any questions.
Great, thank you very much, Nancy. And I know this has been a tremendous amount of work. And my congratulations to you and your team for doing this. Absolutely incredible. So we'll turn it over to folks for questions. Again, if you have any questions or comments for Nancy, please enter them in the chat box or in the question box, and I'll receive them on this end. There were two that came in while you were speaking, and one comment. I'll share the comment because I think it's a good one. It was somebody commented that they love this idea and this framework. So I think you got some fans out there already, Nancy. One question came in, and it's I think a good one, but a bit long. It says, I noted your link between quality domains and change ideas, and also in your big picture, your quest for ensuring client outcomes and measures. I am wondering how or if you are planning to integrate the quality domains into your scorecard, which will start to evolve those scorecard metrics to be outcome focused.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I believe that will be part of the journey. We'll certainly look at it. Where the quality domains right now land is we've created a template where we're testing it out still, so I didn't include it in my presentation, but the review committee has established measures of how are they prioritizing or how are they making some of the decisions around recommendations for these initiatives moving forward. And the quality domains are one of those. So it's the filters it goes through. So we use the quality domains right now to filter it through, and we use our strategic plan as well as a tool for filter. As we evolve and become much more comfortable in using that, we certainly can look at how are we applying those domains to our reports. So the scorecard, but I'm also thinking in terms of performance measures that are the reports we're currently developing at both the program and at the individual staff levels as well. So although I don't have a very specific concrete answer as to when or how we're going to do that, it's definitely part of our process to get there.
Great. Thank you, Nancy. And I'm going to ask a question because I'm the facilitator and I get to do that. Because I know you guys have done a lot of work on this framework and it is extremely impressive. It gives a lot of clarity and guidance, I think, to your staff. And as you said, it kind of helps bring those ideas to life, those quality ideas to life. And I was wondering, just relating back to Paula's presentation, for yourself and David, your CEO, who've really been champions and leaders in quality, are there certain behaviors or things that you've modeled or that have helped you to really rally your staff and your team to embrace quality improvement and see it as important?
Well, some of the things we've been doing, we started a couple years ago with town halls. Folks, if you're familiar with town halls, we used to have staff development days, and we've changed the focus to town halls. And part of the business in town halls is really to rally and update staff on what's going on, and we keep quality on that agenda. So it allows people to understand, well, what's quality, what are we doing towards that, and how we can champion them to get involved in that. So that's been one way we've done that. We also have, like I mentioned earlier, in our program business meetings, quality is a standing agenda as well. The continuous improvement model we've implemented, where David has gone to all the teams and talked about it. Our project office has gone and talked about it and encouraged those ideas. At our last town hall a few weeks back, we were able to share with staff that we've had some successes. We've been able to report back the number of applications that have come through, the number of them that have been gone through the review period and that we're working on currently. David has met with the folks that have put those applications in to talk about, getting a better understanding of their change idea and how they see themselves involved and leading some of the work that's happening. And the representation of those change ideas are actually quite broad. I think we've covered almost all our programs and functional centers, which are almost 13 across the organization. So people are thinking about this. And we still have a ways to go, for sure. This is only the very beginning of how to do that. But it's to the point around the leadership, and it's supporting this from behind the scenes and leading it along the way. And it comes from the leadership team. And so ensuring even at a management level that we're constantly talking about this and bringing it to the team and looking at it at a team level, what those ideas and changes need to look like. So I think over the next year, the evolution around that will be very interesting, because I think we're really going to grow in that area so that we can continue to support the development of the culture around quality. So does that help answer your question, Mike?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much, Nancy. Any final questions for or comments for Nancy? Seeing none, again, thank you very much for taking the time to share this work with us. And I'll remind folks too that the slides from today are on the handout section. We'll also email them out so you have those as well, because this is a lot of great information. So by way of a wrap up, I'll make sure to mention some upcoming things that may be of interest to folks. Of course, at the outset, we mentioned the E-QIP community of practice, which all of the past webinars, including this one, are recorded and housed, as well as the material and slides from each. Also lots of quality improvement resources, things like experience-based co-design tools that Paula mentioned in her presentation, as well as a lot of other things. So if you are not already a member, by emailing that email on your screen or visiting and making a request, we can make sure that you gain access to the community of practice. You can also learn more about E-QIP, of course, by visiting CMHA Ontario's website or AMHO's website, where there's a lot of good information about the work that teams like Nancy's team have been doing and are continuing to do. And I'll let you know of a couple upcoming webinars that may be of interest. The first being a continuation of our series supporting QI and looking at sustaining and spreading success. So taking a look at when great innovative ideas are tried and are maybe successful, how do we continue to sustain that success and also spread it within our own agency, within local systems and beyond. So that session is going to be happening August 3rd, 12 to 1, and the link is on the screen if you and it's in the slides that we'll send out. But you're certainly welcome to join us for that, and we're very lucky. Alice Strawn from Health Quality Ontario is going to be joining us and leading that session with her vast amount of expertise in this area. Also upcoming, but not yet with a solid date, but hopefully in end of August, early September, we're going to hear from more of the agencies who've received sort of the non-traditional project coaching from E-QIP. So agencies like Nancy's who've done some fantastic work relating to quality improvement and to working with data. So we'll be hearing from a number of those. So stay tuned for that. I'm sure there'll be some very exciting report backs at that webinar. So thank you very much again to both of our speakers, Paula and Nancy, for taking the time to present and share your expertise with all of us. And if there's any questions or comments after today's webinar, please feel free to reach out to either myself or Lynette at AMHO, and we'll make sure to try and answer them or provide you any resources that you're asking for. We are going to send out an email immediately following this with a quick evaluation, as well as the slide deck from today. So thank you very much, and look forward to continuing to talk quality with you again soon. Thank you.